This story happened to me about 2 years ago while I was in university working on my degree in biology. I had signed up for a trip to gather samples for an experiment some students in the ecology department were going to run. It required the collection of samples from several sites. They recruited biology, ecology and forestry majors to help them complete the sampling in a shorter period. The area my group was to take samples from was a few hours from my uni in the Pacific Northwest. There are 9 of us in my group, 8 students and a supervising professor. We got to the campsite late that evening and set up our tents. One of the other students had brought a big container of split pea soup from home and was sharing it with the others on the trip. I don't really care for split pea soup, so I declined the offer. Everyone had some except me, one other student and the professor. Come the next morning, the 5 students who had eaten the soup weren't in the best of shape. They were in the grips of some gnarly food poisoning and were in no shape to hike for 8 or 9 hours to collect the samples we needed. The professor who was supervising us had originally made some rules, such as people travel in groups of at least 2, and we had to return to camp by nightfall. Now, these were rules tossed over to make sure we kept the timetable and collected all the required samples. We were just told to do your best to complete the work assigned as long as you can do it safely. That morning, I set out for a long day of hiking. After a mile or so, I ran into the stream I was supposed to follow. I needed to travel about 4 miles upstream, stopping every quarter of a mile to collect samples of the water and soil. This meant I had to hustle to get back before dark. Halfway through the day, I realised it wasn't going to happen. About 2 miles into my hike, I stopped for lunch, sitting on a log overlooking the stream. The scene was really peaceful until I smelled the cigarettes. It wasn't the smell of cigarettes being smoked, more the musty smell of a heavy smoker's car where cigarette butts have been left to ferment for weeks on end. I looked around but couldn't see anyone. I just assumed that the wind had blown the scent of some hunter or hiker over to me, but minutes later the smell hadn't faded. The vegetation in the area was not that thick, but there was still a lot of places for someone to duck behind a tree or a bush. I was unnerved that someone was apparently staying close enough to me for me to smell them for this long without so much as a word. I quickly packed up the trash from my lunch and continued up the stream. The musty smell of cigarette went away for the next few hours. It wasn't until I arrived at my last sample location, late into dusk, that I smelled it again. The woods were getting really dim at this point. Looking back on it, it was a really stupid idea to stay out so late, as just hiking back to the camp in the dark would be pretty dangerous even without a cigarette smoking stalker. Having just put the collection tubes in my bag, I shined a light around in the darkening woods looking for whoever was giving off the smell. I didn't see anything that caught my attention. It would actually be more correct to say I saw too many things in the dim light that might have been a head sticking out from behind a tree or someone crouched low in the foliage. I didn't like the idea of being in dark woods with a stranger who, for the second time, was lurking near me without revealing themselves, so I began to double time it back down the stream. I made much better time on the way back, though it was dark because I didn't have to stop to take any samples. Even so, I didn't get back to camp till a bit before 10. I was one of the last ones to get back, and everyone but the professor was already asleep. I didn't mention the cigarette smell to the professor because he seemed tired as it was, and he headed off to bed in his RV soon after I got back. I headed to my tent soon after. At some point in the night, I woke up needing to take a pee. I decided to head into the woods to do my business, as I knew some of the other students were still feeling ill and needed the RV toilet for more urgent matters than just having to take a pee. I walked about 100 feet into the woods, found a tree and did what I needed to do. As I turned back to go to camp, something caught my eye. Somewhere off in the woods there was a tiny red glow. I was confused as to what it was until it flared momentarily and I realised it was a cherry of a cigarette. I stood there for a while, watching the red ember glow, fade, then move slightly closer to the ground, as whoever was smoking would take it out of their mouth. Not being able to see the person, I assumed they were watching the camp. I didn't know if they had seen me make my way into the woods or not, as the campfire had been doused and the moon was only half full, so there wasn't much light. I made my way slowly back to camp as quietly as I could and entered the RV to wake up the professor. I told him about the person smoking in the woods and about the smell of cigarette earlier that day. However, when we got outside the RV, the ember to the cigarette was gone. My professor woke up the other students who hadn't come down with food poisoning, and we took it in turns watching over the camp. I didn't see or smell anything else when I was on guard duty and went to sleep when the professor woke up for his turn. In the morning, the professor, the other students and I went to where we guessed the smoker had been standing that night before, and sure enough we found about 10 cigarette butts on the ground next to a tree. The tree itself looked like someone had been stabbing and twisting a knife or another sharp object into it, as the bark and the outer layers of the wood had been damaged and chipped away. The professor decided that the group should head back that day, even though we hadn't collected all the samples we were supposed to, just to be on the safe side. We packed up camp and drove down the dirt trail without incident. The second we got onto the paved highway though, a white panelled van pulled out of a clearing just off the shoulder and began following us. This van stayed behind us all the way back, pulling off the highway when we did, taking the same surface streets that we did, and only stopped following us when we turned onto the road to our university campus. Everyone was freaked out by this, but it was around 9 at night on the weekend, so the security office on campus was closed. We decided to unload the RV and call it a night, as the van hadn't followed us onto campus. I offered to help the professor catalogue and store the collection tubes from our trip, so it was another couple of hours before I left the biological science building and started heading towards the dorm building I lived in. I stepped out into the cool night air and began walking, my professor having left the building in the other direction to get to his car and drive home. It was a couple of dozen feet outside the building, which was now locked, when I was hit with the musty smell of old cigarettes. I looked around, and about 25 yards away in the darkness off another footpath, I saw the cherry of a cigarette smouldering away. I was pretty scared at this point, but just hoped it was a student having a late night smoke. I couldn't completely convince myself that this was the same musty smell that I smelt the night before in the woods. I started down the footpath and soon passed whoever was smoking. 100 feet or so later, I looked over my shoulder and saw the cigarette cherry bopping into the darkness. The smoker was following me. This creeped me out a little bit more, but I still held it together. That is until I got around a small stand of trees and I saw a white panelled van parked alone in the parking lot. I took off for a sprint towards my dorm building. I looked over my shoulder a few steps into my run. I saw the cherry of a cigarette fall to the ground and a dark shape beginning to move after me. I didn't look back again, but I could hear someone running in the grass off of the path. I got to the entrance of my dorm building and frantically waved my key card in front of the card reader that controlled the door lock. As soon as I hear the soft beep, I open the door, jump through the doorway and shut the door quickly. I stopped and peered through the glass door. I saw the dark shape stop just before the lit pathway. I just watched for a minute or two, then I saw the spark of a lighter. The light is just barely bright enough to illuminate a shaggy beard and a brim of a baseball cap before it disappears and was replaced with a red glow of a cigarette. I turned and headed up the stairs to my dorm room. By the time I get to my window overlooking the same yard I had just run through, there is no trace of a dark figure or a cigarette cherry. After that, I didn't see that white panelled van again or smell that musty cigarette smell, and I hope I never do. This happened my freshman year of college. I was very excited to move into the dorms and meet my first ever roommate. About a week before school started, the dorms threw a fun little mixer party where everyone gets dressed up to meet their hallmates and dorm RAs. I got ready to go and asked Anne, my dorm mate, if she wanted to come along. She said she didn't like people and did not want to go. I decided not to bother her and went alone. When I got back about 2 hours later, Anne was sitting on my bed facing the door. I felt really creeped out. She asked where I had been for so long. I told her I had gone to the mixer. It seemed like she was angry with me. This was the first time I thought she was weird. Everything just started getting worse after the first night. She started doing really weird things like skipping her classes so she could wait for me outside my classes. She would draw pictures of me and leave them on my bed with notes saying that they were for me. She's gone through my phone when I left it unattended. Anne would always stay home despite me trying to get her to go out and do social things. My brother was a senior that year and attended the same college. He was living in an apartment about a 5-minute drive from dorm and liked to host small parties. I invited Anne to one of his parties and surprisingly she actually went. When we got home, she revealed to me that she had stolen a cup from his house as a souvenir to remember the night. I told my RA about this, however, because she said Anne was not doing anything threatening, I could not change rooms. One night I went to a late movie with a guy and my phone was off. When I turned it back on, Anne had called me 20 times and sent me 32 text messages. She was calling my mother and the cops saying that I had gone missing. When I got home, Anne was sitting on my bed waiting for me. I spoke to the university policeman who came to the dorm and I told him I was fine and apologised for the disturbance. Throughout the semester, I started to notice random things like my hairbrush, random pairs of panties and clothes had gone missing. I decided to look in her drawers and found that she had a few pairs of my worn underwear. I went to tell my RA, but she said I could not prove that they were mine and I should not have gone looking in her drawers. I could not prove anything. I had to live with this crazy girl. The whole weirdness of the situation climaxed one night. Anne had left a copy of the Old Testament on my bed. When I opened it, she had tied my hair collected off my brush into a cross with her hair. I knew it was our hair because my hair is jet black and her hair was light blonde. Terrified to be in my room, I fled to my brother's house, leaving all my belongings behind. Later that night, I logged into my Facebook account and I had 40 new notifications. Anne had logged into my Facebook from my computer and tagged me in about 30 pictures. Anne had screenshots of my arbitrary conversations I had had with my friends and posted them on my wall, along with a few other pictures she had taken of me. I showed these to the RA the next day and she finally said I could change rooms. Fortunately, after the end of the semester, Anne got into an exchange program and moved to France, so I never had to see her on campus again. I had just started uni and it was my first night in my new flat share in Whitechapel, London. For those of you that don't know, the place is famous for all the wrong reasons and it is rough as houses. I don't scare easily and I thought it would be a good idea to explore the area on foot. I was going to call my best friend from my phone box as my mobile was out of action that night. Sure, I could have asked my flatmates, but it was more of an excuse to get out for a bit. So I set off, purposely keeping away from the main roads and taking in the scenery a little bit. Trouble is, back then, it was really difficult to find a public phone because everyone had mobiles already. So I'm walking deeper and deeper into the little back streets. I had been walking for about an hour, zigzagging, until I finally see it. 3 boxes right next to each other, further down the dark, narrow street. Result, I choose the middle one and I call her. Very soon after, Two huge guys pop their head from behind the first phone box. They look rough. One of them has a huge scar on the side of his face. I'm petite, but I hope that pulling the hood of my jacket over my head will make them forget that I'm a girl. It clearly doesn't work. They keep hiding behind the phone box, periodically popping their heads over to see if I'm finished yet. This made no sense as the other boxes were available and looked in working order. They hadn't bothered checking them. I looked around and for the first time appreciated the situation I was in. Dark, long, deserted street. No idea where I was. All the lights in the building around me were off. It was late, but not that late. I correctly assumed that nobody would open their door to me. At this point, I was shaking. Their faces had taken on a menacing grin, and they would just not go away and kept staring. No way was I going to end that call. I had taken enough coins to call my friend's mobile, but she had picked up on the landline straight away. By now though, I had been on the phone for an eternity, and she's desperate for me to tell her where I am. I checked the filthy phone for info and realised that it has a number on it which can be called. We make a pact. If the call dies, she will call me back on this number, and if I don't pick up, to pass the info on to the police so they can locate me. Unless I take a chance and run first. I keep hoping that someone trustworthy will come this way and I can run to them, but nobody turns up. I'm shitting myself at the thought of my coins running out, or for the two guys running out of patience and grabbing me anyway. They are only a few feet from me. I was so desperate at this stage, getting myself ready to try and outrun them back into the dark little streets where I didn't know where I was anymore. And then it happens. Rain. Goddamn rain. Not the little pissy rain we get here usually, but a full-on downpour. The two guys did not like getting wet. They left. I have never been so happy about crappy weather before or since. I tell my friend that I'm doing a runner and I shoot off. I see them again trying to get into a car down a side road, but I just keep running. By now I feel sufficiently far away from them to get away. I hear the car in the background and I just run and run and run without turning around. I follow my instincts and actually make it back home in fewer turns than on the way out. I lived there for years but never tried to go back to the phone boxes. Maybe someone recognises them. I'm curious as to how far they actually were from the main road. My days of late night sightseeing are a thing of the past now.